On today's podcast, we're going to be covering PPE and why it should be covering you. So stay tuned. Welcome to Warehouse Safety Tips. You can find the show notes to each episode, links to information mentioned on the podcast, the social media platforms we're on, and anything else related to the podcast at warehousesafetytips.com. Now, if you're a seasoned podcast listener, this podcast is going to be different from most you listen to. It's based around exactly what the name implies, warehouse safety tips. And since the people in this industry are busy, we know that time is money and each episode will be as short and to the point as possible. And now, with all of that out of the way, let's get to the podcast. Although the COVID-19 pandemic has made the acronym PPE, which stands for Personal Protection Equipment, an almost by-the-minute reference within the media, it's nothing new. But it might be something that you didn't pay as much attention to as you do now. As it pertains to viruses, most people are likely associating PPE to various masks. But PPE comes in many forms, including but not limited to hard hats, safety glasses, goggles and shields, earplugs or muffs, masks and respirators, reflective vests, safety harnesses, back braces, fire retardant uniforms, gloves, boots in both slip-resistant and or steel-toed versions, and or full bodysuits. And as mentioned, this list doesn't showcase all the PPE that you'll encounter, nor does it represent all the variations of those items. Different jobs have different needs and requirements. Before moving on, here's a word from one of our sponsors. If you've ever been to or worked in a warehouse, you know just how important safety is to both management and staff. It's almost impossible to go 10 steps without seeing safety tape, angles, signs, and or safety products. It's these items that show us how to be safe and avoid danger in the workplace. And if you're looking for the best products to make this happen, look no further than Mighty Line. Mighty Line floor signs and floor markings offer the best industrial products out there. We're proud to have Mighty Line as the official floor sign and floor marking company for the Warehouse Safety Tips podcast and site. Go to mightylinetape.com/safety tips to request a sample pack of their incredible safety signs and floor markings. Now back to the podcast. Have you ever heard the saying, knowledge is power? What if I told you that it's not true, at least not as perceived? Yes, having knowledge is certainly a great thing, but only if you do something with it. Therefore, a more detailed saying would probably be applied knowledge is power. The same thing applies to PPE. You can have some or all of the previously mentioned PPE items in your possession, but if you don't use them properly, they'll do you no good. And using them properly includes using them all the time. Accidents can happen at any time, which means you have to be ready for anything all the time. I can't tell you how many times I or somebody that I was working with took off PPE to wipe their head of sweat, wipe it off such as dirty safety glasses, and or remove a harness for just a second. It's that second that management would come over and tell us to put it back on. They weren't doing it to bust our chops, but because that couple of seconds or minutes is where accidents happen. And it's their job to keep you safe and the facility accident-free. It's also your job. So the next time you're working, don't just have PPE with you. Make sure you have applied PPE. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Warehouse Safety Tips. If you visit warehousesafetytips.com, you'll find the show notes for this episode and access to all of our blog posts, previous podcasts, advertiser information, and much more. Thank you for listening to Warehouse Safety Tips and have a safe day.